You used to be good at making decisions. You used to trust yourself. You used to know who you were. And then you met them. And somewhere along the way, all of that quietly disappeared. You might have blamed yourself. You might have told yourself you were just tired or anxious, or maybe you had always been this way. But here is the truth that took researchers years to prove. What you are experiencing is not a personality flaw. It is not weakness. It is not you falling apart. It is your brain, physically, neurologically changed by what you lived through. And once you understand what actually happened inside your mind, you will never question your experience again. Narcissistic abuse is not just emotional pain. It is a sustained, repeated pattern of psychological manipulation that targets the very structures inside your brain responsible for safety, memory, and self-worth. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, one of the world's leading clinical psychologists on narcissistic personality disorder, has said repeatedly that the aftermath of narcissistic abuse mirrors the neurological fingerprint of complex trauma. Not because survivors are fragile, because the abuse itself was specifically designed, whether consciously or not, to destabilize the way you think. Let that settle for a moment. The confusion you feel is not a coincidence. It is a consequence. Here is where it starts. Deep inside your brain sits a small, almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Its job is survival. It scans everything around you for danger, and when it detects a threat, it floods your body with stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, to prepare you to fight, flee, or freeze. In a healthy relationship, this system fires occasionally and then rests. But in a relationship with a narcissist, it never gets to rest, because the threat is never consistent. And that is the cruelest part. One day they are warm, attentive, charming, the person you fell in love with. The next day they are cold, critical, unpredictable. You never know which version is walking through the door. And your amygdala, trained to detect danger, goes into a permanent state of hypervigilance. It stays switched on, always scanning, always bracing, always waiting for the next shift. This is what survivors describe when they say they felt like they were walking on eggshells. That was not a metaphor. That was your nervous system in a state of chronic alarm. And chronic alarm has consequences. When cortisol floods your brain over and over again for months or years, it begins to cause measurable physical changes. Research by Dr. Martin Teicher at Harvard Medical School found that prolonged psychological stress, particularly in relationships, can reduce the volume of the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for forming and storing memories. This is why you struggle to remember things clearly. This is why your memories of the relationship feel fragmented, hazy, like pieces of a puzzle that do not quite fit together. The narcissist told you that you were remembering things wrong. They told you it never happened, or it did not happen like that, or you were being dramatic. And because your hippocampus was genuinely under siege, you could not defend yourself with certainty. You doubted what you knew. You started to believe them. This is not a coincidence. This is gaslighting working in concert with neuroscience. There is something else happening at the same time. Another region of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, long-term planning, and emotional regulation, begins to lose its ability to function at full capacity under chronic stress. It becomes harder to think clearly, harder to make decisions, harder to see the situation for what it is. You might have noticed yourself becoming indecisive in ways that felt foreign to you. You might have found yourself unable to plan ahead, unable to imagine a future that felt real. That was not weakness. That was your prefrontal cortex being drowned out by a brain in survival mode. Dr. Craig Malkin, psychologist and author of Rethinking Narcissism, describes narcissistic relationships as uniquely destabilizing because they exploit the very attachment system your brain is wired to trust. Human brains are designed to bond. They are wired to seek closeness, to need it, to attach. When the person you are bonded to is also the source of your pain, the brain enters an impossible loop. It cannot simply detach. It cannot simply leave. Because leaving, neurologically, feels like losing safety. even when staying is what is destroying you. This is why you stayed longer than you thought you should have. This is why you went back. This is why, even after it ended, you still missed them in a way that made no sense to anyone around you. Your brain was not broken. It was doing exactly what it was built to do, trying to stay attached to someone it had learned to depend on for moments of relief in an otherwise relentless cycle of stress. That cycle has a name: idealize, devalue, discard. And then, when you start to recover, they return. A behavior researchers call hoovering. Each time the narcissist pulled you back in with warmth or affection after a period of coldness, your brain released a small hit of dopamine, the pleasure and reward chemical, the same one activated by unpredictable rewards. Neuroscientists know that unpredictable rewards are the most powerful reinforcers of behavior. Slot machines work on this exact principle. So does intermittent reinforcement in abusive relationships. You were not weak for being hooked. You were human, and the cycle was wired directly into your brain's reward system. Sam Vaknin, one of the earliest researchers to extensively document narcissistic abuse dynamics, noted that survivors often display a cluster of symptoms that look remarkably similar to those seen in prisoners of war and hostages, not because they were physically imprisoned, but because the psychological conditions were structurally identical. Isolation, unpredictability, the periodic granting and withdrawal of approval, the erosion of identity, the dependency on the abuser for emotional regulation. Your brain adapted to survive that environment. And now that you are out, those same adaptations may feel like they are working against you. You might startle easily. You might find yourself unable to trust your own perceptions. You might feel numb or disconnected, or suddenly overwhelmed by small things. You might notice that you no longer know what you want, what you like, what you think, because so much of your mental energy went toward monitoring and managing someone else. That is not permanent damage. That is your nervous system in recovery. Here is what the research tells us about what healing actually looks like in the brain. The hippocampus, that memory-forming structure that was shrunk by chronic stress, can regenerate. Studies show that with time, safety, and the right support, the brain begins to rebuild. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to change and rewire, does not stop after abuse. It continues. New neural pathways form. The amygdala learns slowly that it is no longer in danger. The prefrontal cortex regains its voice. This is not a fast process, and it cannot be rushed, but it is real. Therapy modalities like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, have shown particular effectiveness in helping the brain process traumatic memories that got stuck in the body and the nervous system. Somatic approaches that work directly with the physical sensations of trauma have helped survivors reconnect with themselves. Even simple practices of nervous system regulation, slow breathing, physical safety, predictable routine, begin to signal to the amygdala that the threat has passed. You are not trying to get back to who you were before, because the person you are becoming on the other side of this, the one who understands their own brain, who recognizes manipulation, who has rebuilt trust in their own perceptions, is not lesser. They are clearer. Recovery from narcissistic abuse is not about forgetting. It is not about forgiving on anyone else's timeline. It is about understanding that your brain responded intelligently to an unintelligent situation, that it protected you the only way it knew how, and that now, in safety, it is slowly, steadily learning that you are no longer there. You used to be good at making decisions. You used to trust yourself. You used to know who you were. And you will again, not in spite of what happened, but because you finally understand what it did, and you refused to let it be the last word.